close they're cutting it in terms of
They
logistics.
I know people, this is a common debunker trope here, so don't yell at me. But um, this is not. They're not. They don't plan ahead like this. Like they're very haphazard and meatheads, right? They're like they don't have like sort of the strategic demonstrated anything like that where they had you know we're going to get these guys to attack here and then we'll get those guys to attack and then we'll be able to attack these guys and we'll fight them in here. Like there hasn't been a big arms build up. Like they're not prepared for this. They've been sending weapons to Ukraine. Like a few weeks ago they were sending weapons to Ukraine from Israel. So I do not think that this is like a long-term strategy here. I think this is just them fucking lashing out. I mean, the first casualty is the truth. I mean, the truth has long been absent from this conversation. So I guess you could say we've long been at war here, but like there's never been a whole lot of honesty in this specific discussion anywhere in the world. Well, sure, maybe like the Islamic world, but not in the West, right? We've never had, always from day one, it was never like even like that whole slogan, right? That land without a people for a people without a land. Like that was their rallying call. And that was what their catchphrase was in the West, right? When they were, this was very much a thing that was supported by all these governments, I think partially because of the anti-Semitism, right? They were, it's like Liberia, but also because of the, like Joe Biden said, if it didn't exist, we'd have to invent it, right? It's an aircraft carrier in the Middle East that just sits there. And, because we're such a belligerent people, a belligerent nation, we're not, sorry. Yeah, we are, but not like this, right? This is, capitalism, right? Like, this is them using this wedge to, like, constantly spark instability and keep countries from being able to develop, right? They're developed, right? They don't want anybody else to be able to have stability so they can prosper, right? They made that mistake with China, and they're not going to make it again. So they want to make sure that everybody else is constantly at odds and fucking pulling their hair out and getting attacked and, having to divert resources towards military. And then exactly, the nukes is like, that's their trump card, right? That's why they can play around and poke and, spark these conflicts because they're confident that at the end of the day, if they have to, they can nuke them, which is effectively delusional. Like I know that they like I thought for a minute I thought they were going to do like a nuclear false flag against Russia, but they can't, right? They maybe against somebody that doesn't have nukes they could try that. It's just like if you're getting into like if you have to bomb all the point, like in a nuclear war, if they think they can win a first strike conflict, right? They have to think that they can take out like all of Russia's silos and probably China's too, right? All of Russia and China's silos all at once, right? And they can't, I thought that's what they were going to do with Zaporozhye, right? They still might, But then the same problem though, right? Then you still have to like, if you're going to accuse Russia of doing it as like a pretense, I guess, to nuke them, I mean, they could do it. I just don't like they can't do it and think they're going to pivot from that to winning a nuclear exchange, right? Like they can't say, "Oh, Russia used nukes, so now we get to use nukes," because then they still have the same problem. It's still mutually assured destruction. Well, I think we'll definitely lose that exchange. Yeah. They have the EMPs.
Too old for Twix says, oh my fucking god, peeling pumpkin sucks and is fucking dangerous.
Peeling a pumpkin?
Our, in terms of other contingencies,
America's not disposable. What are you talking about?
Israel, to grant them this ability to carry out as long of an operation
the whole world's disposable,
and also to
in that
continuously grant
sense.
them impunity as they do so. But the other possibility is that
this is like a fucking this is the reason this country was prosperous back in the day when you actually had to fucking work for it was because there's a lot of resources. You know, that's this big ass country with tons of fucking you know. Like, there's a lot of shit here that's not even developed because it's imperial. It's just cheaper for everybody. That's not true at all. What? No. It's just, it's cheaper for them to fucking import shit from other countries because, like, it's dirty, too. Right? Like, with rare earths, for instance. America has all the shit that we get from China. We just don't want that fucking yucky pit and, you know, stinking up the place when it's, like, cheaper to just pay them to, you know, have them do it. Okay, but again, like, because financial capital is taken over, right, that does not mean that, like, America is incapable of doing industrial capital. It's just that our ruling class would rather do the finance capital because it's easier. You know, you can make higher returns. That doesn't mean that we can't still do industrial capital. It's just, like I said, the decision to move towards a financial capital system was not because we were out of industry, you know. I mean, it's about money and power. But, you know, it's the same thing. I mean, I think the people who are in a position to be able to exercise power or seek to attain power are the fucking billion, you know, the rich people anyway. Those are like, the Venn diagram is a circle.
The U.S. is using this entire crisis as an opportunity to provoke Iran. And I want to go over this again.
All of capitalism needs an underclass.
Continuously repeated until other people begin covering this. This 2009 policy paper from the Brookings Institution, funded by the U.S. government, funded by the U.S. arms industry.
Yeah, this is a good video.
Big oil, by U.S. big tech, Silicon Valley. They published this paper, which Path to Persia, Options for a New American Strategy Toward Iran, 2009, and it laid out a very clear policy of attempting to provoke war with Iran, with the ultimate goal of regime change in Tehran, the capital of Iran. And I want to go over this quote again from this 2009 paper, a paper published with funding provided by the U.S. government and U.S. industry.
Also, you know, fossil fuels, right?
It would be far more preferable if the United States could cite an Iranian provocation as justification for airstrikes before launching them. Clearly, the more outrageous, the more deadly, and the more unprovoked the Iranian action, the better off the United States would be. Of course, it would be very difficult for the United States to goad Iran into such a provocation without the rest of the world recognizing this game, which would then undermine it. One method that would have some possibility of success would be to ratchet up covert regime change efforts in the hopes that Tehran would retaliate overtly or even semi-overtly, which could then be portrayed as an unprovoked act of Iranian aggression. This is what the U.S. had been doing before this paper was written, and what the U.S. had continuously done ever since this paper was published. And not only do they support political opposition groups inside Iran, they also openly talked about supporting U.S. State Department-listed terrorist organizations, supporting and arming them to undermine the Iranian government toward the goal of regime change, eventual regime change. The Mujahideen al-Khaliq, MEK, is one of these terrorist organizations the U.S. sought to use against Iran. I talked about a 2007 article by
1,155,000.
U.S. was
Does that mean 1 million? What? I don't give. Oh, 55 millimeter. Okay. Yeah. Remember I said earlier, chat? 7,000 a day is how many Israel needs? At least. To give you some context.
Sponsoring and preparing extremist organizations tied to Al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood, preparing them for a proxy war against Iran. So these are things that had been planned, and these are things that had begun being implemented. These are things that are now well underway.
What's that work out to? What's 1 million divided by 7,000?
Into a war, either directly through a provocation the U.S. itself carries out, or by using Israel. And just so people are very clear about this, there is an entire chapter in this paper titled "Leave It to Bibi: Allowing or Encouraging an Israeli Military Strike." And this is what the paper admits. right from the outset of this option. For the United States, the Islamic Republic of Iran has been an enemy for 30 years, one that has sought to thwart U.S. policies in the Middle East, such as advancing the Arab-Israeli peace process and creating stable regional security arrangements. And that is what they're admitting, is that Iran doesn't pose a national security threat to the U.S.
142
It simply, obstructs U.S. ambitions in the Middle East, thousands of miles away from U.S. shores. And this claim that Iran is obstructing an Arab-Israeli peace process, that is ridiculous.
That's wrong, though. That's how many North Korea has, not how many NATO has. How many does NATO have?
There's no such genuine process taking place. And when they talk about stable regional security arrangements,
how many does Russia have?
Basing its military everywhere and controlling everything. The paper continues, crisis after crisis has arisen between Iran and the United States, but Iran has never been, and almost certainly never will be, an existential threat to the United States.
Like preschoolers, Palestinian kids.
They admit that Iran poses no threat to the U.S. itself. It harbors no territorial designs on the United States, has never conducted a terrorist operation aimed at the American homeland, and even should it acquire nuclear weapons, lacks the delivery systems to threaten the United States directly. And this is a point they make all throughout the paper. Iran acquiring nuclear weapons would be more of a deterrent to protect Iran rather than a weapon they would eagerly use unilaterally and unprovoked against any other nation, whether you're talking about the US or Israel or some other US proxy in the region. Continues. Further, its economy is anemic, and even if substantially reformed, will probably never provide the base for Iran to make itself a challenger to the United States on par with Nazi Germany, Imperial Japan, the Soviet Union, or Communist China. Although that could be debated now, Iran militarily and economically is particularly powerful and influential in the region and does challenge at least US influence in the region. Nowhere in the paper do they discuss an unprovoked Iranian nuclear strike. That is not discussed seriously anywhere in the paper because they know that that threat really does not exist. And as a matter of fact, this is what it says. It says, Israel's strategic room for maneuver in the region would be constrained by an Iranian nuclear deterrent. Not because Iran is going to launch nuclear weapons at Israel, but simply because they will have nuclear weapons. It'll be difficult, if not impossible, to threaten Iran from that point onward. That would constrain the impunity that the U.S. and Israel and other U.S.
Oh, they sent $1 million, so they still have more.
It says the success of Iranian-backed terrorist groups Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza and the West Bank in the last few years has only added to Israel's concern. Hezbollah is obviously, clearly, admittedly supported extensively by Iran. Hamas, not so much. And Hezbollah's existence is a deterrent against Israel. They fight only the Israeli military. They serve as a deterrent against Israeli incursions into southern Lebanon. They played a vital role in expelling Israeli occupation from southern Lebanon.
I've never peeled a pumpkin. I didn't know people did that.
Both U.S. and Israeli ambitions in the region. It is a check and balance against their otherwise unchecked aggression in the region.
Fucking
In this
Hezbollah.
chapter, allowing or encouraging an Israeli military strike, they discuss using Israel as a proxy to conduct a military strike against Iran. And elsewhere in the document, it admits that an Israeli strike on Iran could trigger a wider conflict between Israel and Iran.
We need to send them some
the United States
shaheeds.
and other countries. And that might be what they're trying to do right now. They're using Israel and this
In Minecraft.
ethnic cleansing of Gaza, northern Gaza. They're using that as almost the ultimate provocation, mixed in with Israeli strikes against Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, Israeli strikes into Syria, possibly upcoming strikes against Iran itself. They're using this to provoke Iran. If this cannot provoke Iran, nothing else will. And I've talked about how elsewhere in this paper, they even admit that Iran has tremendous restraint. Even if attacked unprovoked by the U.S. or Israel, they may decide not to retaliate.
Yeah.
Which would force the U.S. and Israel to just continue military aggression against Iran with no pretext at all, which is basically what the U.S. has been moving toward anyway. I understand why people are fixated on Israeli operations in Gaza itself. The
USA makes dude.
The humanitarian catastrophe that is unfolding and expanding. The idea of Israel succeeding in clearing out northern Gaza and displacing over 1 million people permanently, never to return to their homes. Again, I understand why people are laser focused on that, but I do believe we need to zoom out and see the larger threat that looms. As bad as what is happening in Gaza,
Dude, he's such a real. He can't even think of the people.
Has something much worse for the entire region planned, if they're able to. And just to zoom out a little bit more, I have repeatedly talked about how the U.S. is attempting to encircle, contain, and
Fucking look
control
at that,
all of
dude.
Russia.
Look at that.
The U.S. is using Ukraine as a proxy against Russia.
Holy
in
shit.
Europe. The U.S. is using Israel as a proxy against Iran and its allies in the Middle East. The U.S. is using Taiwan
It's
as
so
a proxy against the
psychotic.
rest of China. I'm going to be talking about how the U.S. is recruiting the Philippines as a proxy in its united front against China in Asia Pacific.
I mean,
These three fronts.
they
this is
control
where
the global
US is
drug
working
trade?
in an attempt to encircle and contain Russia, China, also Iran. The U.S. may look at its proxy war in
know,
Ukraine
Oops
and
would
see
know
it
that.
unraveling. They are looking at China's rise in Asia Pacific and considering how grim their prospects are of fighting and winning a military confrontation there. They may see Iran as their best chance in the Middle East, their best chance of slowing down, stopping, or even reversing this overall pivot away from U.S.-led unipolarism toward multipolarism.
Dude.
So we need to keep a close eye on all three of these fronts.
The irony
When
is
we are
they
looking at
would.
any one of these conflicts, we have to keep the bigger picture in mind. I will
Yeah.
continue covering these developments as they unfold.
Though that's
And
more of
until
the
then,
circle,
if you thought this
dude.
video was
It's
useful,
just,
please
like, so
and share.
psychotic.
Think about subscribing. It's free to do.
Yeah.
Helps the channel.
Like, they physically want to enclose them like it's, you know, fucking the 60s, right? It's like boomer shit. Oh, we just gotta fucking hem them in there, you know? It's like a linebacker or something. Like, oh, fucking, they gotta have a good secondary. That's how you win the world. The